It's not going out on much of a limb to say that GoldenEye possessed some of the most iconic guns to ever grace a video game. You got to look down the barrel of James Bond's trusty Walther PP7 with or without a silencer. You could shoot from the hip with the laser rifles from Moonraker, and you killed with a single bullet from Francisco Scaramanga's signature weapon, the Golden Gun. But of course, no one would care what movie license they came from if the gun's handled like crap. So luckily for us, they had some top-notch design decisions going on inside the cylinder. So what really set GoldenEye's guns apart? For my money, it's not the shooting, but the not shooting. What I mean by that mysterious Zen statement is that I think it's the reload mechanic which makes the gun so memorable. And if you take a close look, you'll see why. You might be saying, reloading. Wow, I just want to shoot, but GoldenEye was one of the first of its kind to use a reload. In fact, Rare's original plan was to have the player remove and reinsert the rumble pack into the slot of the N64 controller to reload, which shows just how novel and unprecedented and strange the concept was way back in 1997. Other shooters like Doom let you keep on firing until the cows came home, or you ran out of ammo, whichever came first. But GoldenEye's guns had built-in mandatory intervals where you stopped to put more bullets in. So after every 6 shots with the Cougar Magnum, for example, you had to put the gun down right now, young man, and reload it like a gentleman. But doesn't waiting for stuff kind of like, suck? I mean, it does if you're waiting in line at IKEA, but to paraphrase Wasteland 2 producer Eric Schwartz, a small lapse in time has huge deal implications on the game's strategy. For one thing, he says it gives you a tactical assessment of the enemy's capabilities. So if a rocket just whizzed by your ear and you know that the rocket launcher has to reload after every shot, then you know you have a very brief window of opportunity when your opponent can't shoot you. It also presents a question of whether to shoot now or later. For instance, since the PP7 can fire off its rounds in 1 second, you're going to be reloading a lot, 43% of the time actually, nearly as often as you're firing, so you need to make every shot count or it will leave you hanging. It can even mean the difference between life and death, Schwartz says. That's why the RCP-90 with its huge clip was such a sure bet. It had the endurance of a marathon runner, only needing to be reloaded 9 seconds for every minute of firing, so you were rarely caught with your pants or barrel down.
The hell do you think you're doing?
As you can see, reloading peppered all those manic 4-player shootouts with a hint of tactical strategy, and that's what made them so fun. You could outsmart your friends even if you couldn't outshoot them. As shooters grew up, they continued to refine the concept of reloading. Halo's guns had a wider array of reload times. Gears of War came up with a nifty gun reloading minigame. Call of Duty made an art out of the reload animation. These may seem like minor contributions, but more importantly, the reload gave the genre room to breathe. Because you were not shooting constantly, it cleared the room for things like dynamic narrative, so Elena Fisher and Nathan Drake had time to shoot the breeze instead of just shooting pirates. And we owe that in part to the brilliant guns of GoldenEye. Well, except for the clob. The less said about it, the better. What do you think? Was reloading the ace in the hole, or is there another reason why GoldenEye is so golden? Hash it out in the comments, and if you like what you saw, please subscribe. I'll see you next week. Last week we talked about the body horror that is Hideo Kojima's Metal Gear Solid. Let's see what you had to say. William George unfortunately takes the exact opposite position to the one I took in the episode, arguing that Kojima and Metal Gear Solid just use a generic war is bad kind of statement as an excuse to show off gore and amputation. And you could certainly look at it that way. In fact, if you look outside of the world of games, Francois Truffaut famously said that there's no such thing as an anti-war film. His point being that the medium of film, in its depiction of war, even in a negative context, inadvertently glorifies it just because of what film does, and you can make the same case about video games. That was one of the criticisms, certainly, of Saving Private Ryan, for instance, where Steven Spielberg, the director, claimed it was an anti-war film, but it was also kind of about American righteousness as well. And so, ultimately, this question about whether or not the Metal Gear Solid franchise has a strong war is bad statement and follows through with that, through its mechanics and also its depictions of violence, or it's just using all this gore and stuff the way that other video games typically have. It's really in the eye of the beholder. But at least games are arriving at a point where we can discuss their intentions and what they actually have to say. Wednesday's Serial, I don't know if that's actually this person's real name. If so, awesome, the Serial podcast is great. If not, it's still a mighty fine username. In any case, Wednesday's Serial points out that violence is just one lens through which Metal Gear scrutinizes the inhumanities of war. The other way is through the game's mechanics themselves. So, as you know, in Metal Gear, you have the option, it's very hard, but you have the option to not kill people. And of course, we see see this in a lot of stealth games, but it's very rare that it has real consequence, right? That's tied to something deeper aside from just not killing people. Dishonored being a notable exception. The interesting thing about killing in Metal Gear is that when you do have to resort to violence, you almost feel like you screwed up in a way. Like there's this other, more ideal form of play that's out there that doesn't involve, sort of climbing up behind somebody and stabbing them or whatever. Really, that you feel like you're not playing the game the right way if you kill people. So I think it's a good example of marrying the mechanic to the message.